Last time I said that I like to break down my load development into 5 simple categories. So there's research, there's case prep, charging, seating, testing. And last time we went over to research, talked about that. We picked out our powders, our bullets, all of our components. Well, today we're ready to move on to case prep. But before we go jumping off into the deep end on this one, I want to go over exactly what we're doing here. We're starting with once fired Remington brass for the FN, and we've got brand new Winchester brass for the 1903A3. With new brass, we don't know what size it is. It's new brass. It's whatever the factory set it at. With fired brass, it's oversized. Everything on it's bigger. When it was fired, the case expanded to fill the chamber of the rifle that it was fired in. So the neck of this brass is approximately 7/1000ths of an inch larger than what it will be after we size it and load a bullet. The length of this brass, it expands in all directions. So this brass is also roughly 7/1000ths of an inch too long. It expanded in all directions. So we're going to spray lube on it, and then we're going to run it through a die to essentially squeeze the brass and make it smaller. The lube's just to keep it from sticking in the die. I like Hornady One Shot. A lot of people like it. A lot of people hate it. I've used it for over 10 years with no problem. And it's quick and convenient. But I still keep the old lube pad and lube around just in case I run out or something along those lines. So we're going to spray these down for lube. I like to hit them from 4 directions. And with lube, it's pretty simple. If the case sticks, you didn't put enough on it. If you start seeing dents in the shoulder, you put too much on. Adjust accordingly. Now we take a case and we run it through our sizing die. And I forgot to mention, let this dry. That's where a lot of people mess up with the Hornady One Shot. Let it dry before you use it. We sized our first piece of brass then, and when we sized it, we did several things. We squeezed it essentially from all directions except for one, the top. It's open at the top inside the die, so the brass basically grows in this direction. Sort of like squeezing a tube of toothpaste, and this is the opened end. As a result, our case got longer, and we'll need to go back and trim it down to the correct length. When we ran it through the die, the neck was oversized to start with. The neck was oversized, the length, the diameter of the case itself, everything was oversized. So we put it back to the right size. The way it sizes the neck in this particular die, I have a sizing ball. The neck goes over the sizing ball because the neck's too big. It goes into the top of the die. It squeezes the neck so that it's actually undersized. And then when you bring the case out of the die, that's when the sizing ball opens up the neck to the correct diameter. And we've got a pin on the end that knocks the old primer out. So we deprimed the brass while we were sizing it. Finished sizing all of the once fired brass. Now it goes into the tumbler to get cleaned up. Now for the new brass. This is new brass, so we don't know where it's at as far as its size, so we're going to run it through the die, and then we'll know exactly where it is. So we sized all of our brass, we squeezed it to the correct size, and the once fired brass, it's in the tumbler. Yes, I am behind on the times. It's the old-fashioned regular tumbler with corncob medium brass though. So while that's running, we're going to take the new brass. We're going to trim the overall length to the correct size, the trim to length, and you can find that in any number of places for whatever cartridge you're using. And yes, we are the correct size. Now, I want to chamfer the end. So we're deburring it and chamfering. And because this is new brass, I've got a little tool here that'll chamfer the end of the primer pocket on the inside. With new brass, the way it's made, sometimes it can be pretty rough. We'll just put it that way. So let me get this knocked out real quick. We're finished with the new brass. We trimmed it to the correct trim tool length, chamfered the inside diameter, deburred the outside diameter, chamfered the primer hole. And I inspected all the brass as I was going. And I'll do the exact same thing for the once fired brass, except for with it. I'll also clean out the primer pocket because it's going to be dirty from the carbon from the primer going off. I'll check the primer hole, make sure it's clear of media or anything like that. And I'll inspect the cases especially well after they've been fired, looking for bulges, cracks, splits, that type of thing. Okay, that's my process for prepping brass. Simple and easy and old-fashioned as it can be. It works. Now let's jump off into the deep end. So we fire a cartridge. The brass expands, fills the chamber. We run it through a die. We squeeze it down, make it smaller. It grows. We trim it. We load it. We fire it. It expands. Run it through a die. Shrink it. It grows. We trim it. And repeat the process over and over and over. That's a simple version of what we're doing here. Okay, there's 3 ways to size brass. Full length sizing, like I just did, and that's what you do with brand new brass or brass that's new to you. And that fully sizes the brass. It squeezes it to the smallest size it's going to be for that cartridge. The advantage of full length sizing is because it's the smallest it's going to be, you get the most clearance in the chamber. So you're less likely to run into chambering problems. So if you get a little debris or something in there, it's more likely to chamber than with any of the other methods. So if you get carbon buildup, for example, in the chamber, you're not going to end up with a stuck case that won't chamber. And that's why your semi-autos are almost always full-length sized. Okay. The disadvantage, because we're moving more brass with full-length sizing, every time we trim it, that brass we're trimming, it has to come from somewhere. And where it's coming from is the case walls. So every time you repeat that process, the case wall is getting thinner and thinner until eventually it splits. So you get the shortest case life with full-length sizing. Second method, neck sizing. Yeah, that's really fallen out of favor here lately, but with a bolt action rifle, this case, once it's fired, it will exactly match the chamber it was fired in. It might not match any other chamber, but it's going to match that one, and it will go back into it. So we don't have to size the entire case. We can just size the neck so that it will properly grip a new bullet when we load it into it. The advantage of that, you get increased accuracy because it's a perfect match for the chamber and it's going to be more consistent. And consistency is the name of the game, and accuracy. Plus you get longer brass life. Disadvantage, there is zero clearance in that chamber. So the least little bit of debris or anything, you can run into a problem with the case that it will not chamber, and then it's stuck, and it could be a problem. So traditionally, hunters would full length size their hunting cartridges, and then neck sizing, that was for target ammo. Now, what's become really popular, all the rage these days, what all the cool kids are doing now, partial sizing or bumping the shoulder. Okay, so with bumping the shoulder, You're backing off on the full-length sizer die so that you're not fully sizing it. You're just hitting it enough so that you're shortening the case by 2 or 3 thousandths, whatever you decide, whatever number you go with. The advantage to partial sizing or bumping the shoulder, okay, you get more clearance than with neck sizing, so you're less likely to have a chambering problem, but you also get really good accuracy because it's still a good match for that chamber, and it's going to be really consistent. And you get a lot longer brass life than with full length sizing. So it's sort of the happy medium, best of both worlds. Okay, now this is where we run into problems as hunters. As hunters, we have to decide, do we want safe, reliable, accurate ammo? Or do we want that super precision, zero MOA, best, most accurate cartridges ever created ammo? And that's something we all have to decide. How far are we willing to go chasing precision so that we can be like all the cool kids in the YouTube videos shooting golf balls 5 miles away? Okay, for example, you just saw my process for brass prep. Well, a big buzzword now is neck tension. Neck tension, what a lot of people are doing, they're removing the sizing ball from their die. And when they remove that, they're also removing the depriming pin. So they'll take a universal deprimer, they'll run a fired case through it, punch out the primer, then they'll run the case into the die, and either they'll have very precisely ground mandrel in the die to size the neck, or they'll go back in another process after sizing the case, and then they'll size just the neck using bushings. And what they're trying to do is precisely control the inside diameter of the neck, and they'll combine regular annealing with that so that they can control the elasticity of the brass so that it's constant. And what they're trying to do is precisely control the amount of tension that the neck's putting on the bullet when it's seated. Yeah, I'm not doing all of that. And I'm not just dismissing what they're doing just out of hand. It's just I'm not doing it. It's not worth it for me. Does all of that matter in terms of accuracy? Yes, it does. All right. All of that does matter, and they're doing it for a reason. And keep in mind, this is coming from mainly competition shooters. Okay, well, when you're a competition shooter, you're a competitor. You have to have that level of precision. Well, precision costs. It costs you time, it costs you money, it costs you effort. It's bottom line. Well, if you're going to compete with other people, you've got to pay that cost just to even be competitive. And if you want to win, you're going to have to pay a higher cost. You've got to put in more time, more effort, more precision. That's how you beat other people no matter what you're doing. You put in more. And competitors, the ones that are out there to win, they're all in. All right, they're giving it everything they got. Okay. I'm not competing, I'm hunting. So for me, I'm not willing to pay that price for that level of precision. Now, maybe you are, and maybe that's something you want to get into, and that's fine. I mean, I keep up with what they're doing. It's pretty neat, the stuff they're doing, and that level of precision, it is cool. I mean, honestly, and the accuracy they're getting as a result, and so forth. It's impressive. Again, I'm not willing to pay that price. I'm a hunter, not a competition shooter. What I'm doing here, this works for what I'm going to do. This is going to be more than accurate for what I'm doing. I still want those small groups. I'm just not willing to put in that much time, effort, money, to get to that next level. Right? But there are things they're doing that, if it's easy to incorporate, or I can see how it will benefit me as a hunter, okay, then, hey, well, let's try it. If it's pretty simple, for instance, bumping the shoulder. Okay, I see a benefit to that for hunters, for hunting. So we bump the shoulder. That gives us more clearance than neck sizing, so it's going to be more dependable for chambering. But we do get that increased accuracy and longer case life. Okay, so as a hunter, maybe instead of bumping the shoulder 2/1000ths, maybe for hunting I bump it 4. That's going to give me even more clearance, more reliable chambering. How much is that going to affect my accuracy and case life, though? I should still get really good accuracy from that and good case life. So that's something I'm experimenting with. So yeah, I really do respect what they're doing, and we can learn from those competition shooters because they are on the cutting edge. But just because they're on the cutting edge, that's not necessarily where we want to be, or at least that's not necessarily where I want to be. But I do want to learn from them, and I appreciate all the work they're doing, to get to that level of accuracy. As unimpressive as that was, that's my method for prepping brass. And just like it's been done for a long time, and it still works. So next time we're going to get into charging, seating, and testing. The reason we're going to do all three, you need to know what you're going to do on your testing so that you know how to set up your charges, how many cartridges you're going to need, all of that good stuff. So we're going to call it good here. And for me personally, it's getting pretty late, and I'm ready to just call it a day. So God bless, and have a good night.